lots of with this, with it all being perfect.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? This is Kathryn, the presenter for this hour. Can you hear me okay? Great. I'm presenting remotely. So thank you so much for being here today. It is just a thrill to be with you, even from a distance. So thank you so much for coming to this class. Like I said, my name's Kathryn Grant. I am currently a missionary serving a church service mission for family history, and I'm also a teacher at the BYU Family History Library. Wait, they just changed the name. The BYU Library Family History Center is what it's called now. Why they don't call it a Family Search Center, I'm not exactly sure, but we were told that's our official name. So anyway, it's just a delight to be with you today for this class on fixing sticky problems in Family Tree. And I'm guessing that most of you are here because you have a problem on your tree or had one in the past, or you're trying to help somebody that has a mess on their tree. So the audience is for you guys. If you've either got your own problem on a tree or you're trying to help somebody else fix a problem. So here's what we've got on our schedule for today. First of all, well, this is usually two classes. So I've kind of had to condense it a little bit, but fortunately, the original classes are recorded. And so if you go to the BYU Library Family History Center archive page, you can get the recordings. So, but today we'll make our best effort to put it all in 1 hour. So we'll start with an introduction and context, and then we'll display a quick fixing process. It's only got 3 steps, but it's pretty powerful. Then we'll use that process on a case study. And finally, we'll end with some success tips for fixing those sticky problems. So let's do our little intro with some context. For the purposes of this class, we're not talking about tiny problems, such as a date being off by a year or two, or a spelling variation, because we see those all the time, or a non-standard date or place. On our family trees, these tend to be like little drops of water. So do we want to clean them up? Yes, absolutely. But they're not the type of problem that we're talking about in this class. What we're talking about are things like impossible or conflicting dates or places, like a family in the 1600s that would not have traveled, having all their children in England, but one child born in colonial America probably wouldn't have happened. Or a woman having children when she's 2, not a biological possibility. Incorrect relationships where you can tell that somebody is joined to the wrong parents or to the wrong spouse. And we are talking about problems caused by bad merges, which, as you may have noticed, tend to snowball across generations. So once one bad merge is made, a lot of times that sparks bad merges in the same family and then going up and down the family lines. Compared to the little drip of water over here, these things are more like a stream that we've got to deal with a lot of water. So these are the kinds of problems that we're going to address in the class today. The first important principle to understand, and if you were in the last class, last hour, this will be a recap. But for those of you who are joining us for the just for this hour, we want to talk briefly about the concept of intended identity. And this is a very important concept in family tree, which is a shared tree. So basically, when any user creates a person's profile in Family Tree, they intend it to represent a certain human being. Otherwise, there's no point, right? We're making a pedigree of the human family. So whichever human they intended their profile to represent is the intended identity. The earliest changelog entries show the original intended identity, but the reason this is important to understand is that that identity can be changed through bad merges, bad relationships, etc. The original identity, therefore, becomes the baseline that we use when we untangle problems in family tree. If you want more information on this, I'll display my email at the end, and there's actually a whole separate presentation on this. There is a recording, so I can send you the recording on that if you're interested. Here is another very important tip when fixing problems in family tree, and that is to diagnose the problem correctly. If you try to fix the wrong problem, chances are that the real one will get worse. So let's look at an example. I'd like to introduce you to my buddy Samuel Hibbert. He is the poster child for bad merges in Family Tree. I've been trying for several years to clean him up, and people keep messing him up again. Someday I'm just going to have to like block out a week or something and get him totally cleaned up and sourced and alert notes put on him and whatever. So if you go out to his page right now, it won't look exactly like this, but last I looked, it was still messed up. So let's take a look at poor Samuel, who ends up actually representing, he's got at least 13 merges on him that represent at least 5 different men named Samuel Hibbert. So what we've got here is this guy dies in 1855, but look at the error messages for the kids. It's saying that he had kids after he died, which is an obvious impossibility except for about 9 months, right? And after that, there's no biological way that those kids can belong to him. So somebody came along, a user came along and said, "Oh my goodness, obviously he didn't die in 1855 if he had kids after that time." So she removed the death date.
Oh,
But when we look in the change log, we discover that those children that were born after he died weren't his kids. He really did die in 55. So those kids were added to him by incorrect merges. So the solution was not just to remove the death date, but to keep the correct death date and repair the bad merges and get the kids back in their correct family. So that's just an example of how important it is to diagnose the problem correctly. And intended identity is a huge help in diagnosing the problem correctly. Who is this person really?
okay.
So now let's look at a simple fixing process. The order of these steps is super important. I've tried to do it a different way, and this is why I came up with this certain method, because I tried it the other way and it didn't work very well. So after diagnosing the problem correctly, then here is a simple fixing process. The first thing you want to do is assess the profile for any incorrect merges. If there are any, those are the first thing to fix. Because if you try to do other fixes before you fix the bad merge, then when you do fix the bad merge, it's going to create more problem, in my experience. After you've repaired the bad merges, then you fix the incorrect relationships, such as wrong spouses joined together or wrong children and wrong parents. After that is all cleaned up, then you fix the remaining incorrect information, such as a wrong birth date or a wrong source. I found that it is really essential to do it in this order to have the best chance of success. So let's walk through our case study, which we're calling Three's a Crowd. So I'd like to introduce you to the Parkinsons. We've got pretty decent audio in this room, so let me throw this out to you as class participants. What problem do you notice in this in the list of children, or what potential problem do you see?
There's 3 Williams. There's 2 that were born in the same year.
Yep, we've got we've got all kinds of problems, right? And you nailed the two most obvious ones, and the one we want to focus on is the 3 Williams. So there are 3 boys named William. That's not necessarily unusual in England because often the parents, if an older child died, they would name a younger sibling the same name as the previous one. But a little research on this William reveals a record in 1836. So he was living at least until 1836, which happens to be 10 years after this guy was born, which means the parents would not have given this same name. I've never seen any place in like 30 years of family history research where all three living like multiple biological children would be alive at the same time and have exactly the same name. That just wasn't done. And you can imagine why not, right? How confusing. So this guy was born when this guy was still alive, and this guy was born when this guy was still alive. He didn't die till 71, but this guy was born in 40. So obviously, we've got some problems here. We got one of those sticky problems that we're going to figure out. Now, in the interest of time, we're not going to do all three Williams. We're just going to start with the first one. And we are going to decide whether this guy really belongs in this family. So is this William ending in HHY really the son of these parents? And presuming the rest of the kids are the children of these parents, are they siblings? Right now, we don't know. So because again, remember I mentioned that this is a combined class. In the first class, I would go through all the research that shows the result, shows whether they're the same or not, or whether he belongs in the family, excuse me. But here we're just, in the interest of time, just going to do a summary. So when I did the research and found these people in the census, I discovered that Thomas and Elizabeth, this Thomas and Elizabeth, were from Bolton in Lancashire, which is not too surprising. They were married in Bolton, so apparently they continued to live there. It was very easy to locate them in multiple census records. The first son was clearly theirs. This guy was clearly theirs, as was the second William and was Eliza. But this guy very clearly belonged in a different family. You can't see the birthplaces here, but he was born and christened in a different place, actually had different parents and different siblings. So have you ever seen those cooking shows where they like mix up cupcakes and throw them in the oven and then they take them out like 1 second later? That's kind of what we're doing here. We're fast forwarding through the research, and we now know that this William does not belong in this family. How do we clean up the mistake? Well, first of all, it's helpful to know what caused the error. As we look in the change log, we see that it was due to a bad merge. Now, that isn't, excuse me, that isn't immediately obvious from the type of entry. The way I could tell there had been a bad merge is because of this reason statement here. This is a oh, and we're looking at the change log, by the way, for those of you who may not be familiar. This is just a list of all the changes that pertain to our William that we're going to disconnect. So the reason I can tell there's a bad merge is because of this reason statement. It's one of those canned reason statements. I will just make the comment that about 99% of the time when I've seen this reason statement used, some details contain minor conflicts. The merge has been incorrect. So if you ever feel tempted to use that reason statement, I would strongly recommend that you stop and do some more research and just be sure why the details are conflicting and if these people really are the same people. So as we look at the change log, we see that originally, because the oldest entries are at the bottom of the change log, originally our William Parkinson had a dad, abbreviated THOS for Thomas, Thomas Parkinson, and a mom, Betty, with no maiden surname. But later on, this Thomas was merged with this guy, which you can confirm in their change log. But here's the evidence of it in William's change log. And Betty was merged with this Elizabeth. But they were not the same people. So the bad merges occurred due to what we can call the same name trap, which is where users believe that two people are the same based on solely on their names, irrespective of any other evidence. So the solution here is that we've got to repair those bad merges. How do we do that? That's our first step in the process. So the first thing that I'll always do on this is remember we're focusing on William, but the bad merges on the parents impacted William. So first of all, we're checking William's change log. Are there any bad merges on him? Fortunately, there are not, which simplifies our repair efforts quite a bit. You might be saying, how did you get to this screen in the changelog? I'm not really sure what I'm looking at. So the way I got to this is I brought up Williams changelog and then I clicked filter. And one of the options under filter is merges. In other words, we're saying, please filter the changelog only to show me merges. So after I did this, it puts the title of merges up here saying all you're looking at is merges, and it says there aren't any changes that are merges. So we know there's no bad merges on William, so we can actually click this button here to get back to his changelog, and we know now that we just have to undo the bad merges on the parents. So how do we do that? Well, remember at the bottom of the changelog, we saw the original parents, which are the right ones. They would be the earliest ones on his record. So we click on Thomas's name, and what that does, and we're still in William's changelog, but his dad shows here. So we click on his name, and it brings up the little summary card over here. And then we can click either on his name, which I'm kind of in the habit of doing, or you can click person. They both go to the same place. And excuse me, I need a drink of water. Okay, thank you. So when we click on the name or on the person button, we get taken to Thomas Parkinson's deleted page. This was the page that was deleted in the bad merge, the profile that was deleted in the bad merge. Now, a lot of you may notice that this is the old style page. It's got just a slightly different appearance to it. They've since changed the interface, but this option is still there, restore person. So you want to find the restore person option and click that, because he should not have been deleted in a merge. Now, this is really important. When you unmerge or restore somebody, they're going to ask you why you're doing it. So it's very helpful to write a really clear reason statement. It doesn't have to be long, but it should hit the high points. So what I've done here, remember that screen where I compared the two censuses? So for the families, the one from Bolton and the other from Wally. So here I'm just hitting the high points. This Thomas Parkinson, according to my research, was born in 1796, most likely in Wally. I never actually found a birthplace, but he was always there in the census, and he lived there with his family. On the other hand, the other guy was born 1803 in Bolton, and they both appear separately in the 1841 census, so therefore they cannot be the same person. So, and you notice that's not a real long reason statement. It's only what, four sentences, but it hits the high points of why I know these people are different and shouldn't have been merged. Once I do that, I hit restore and Thomas comes back. Then we need to do it for Betty. We're not going to walk through that, but through her, because the steps are identical. But once you restore both those persons, then you want to look at William. What do you guys see here? We got some problems, right? We got relationship problems because William now has three sets of parents. This is why I said you clean up the merge before you clean up the relationships, because unmerging can can create more issues with relationships that need to be fixed. So what are we looking at here? Well, the top set of parents are the wrong ones. They're the Bolton parents. They're absolutely not this Williams parents, so they shouldn't even be there. The second ones are the right ones. They're the ones we just restored. But what's this little wonky thing down here? Well, because of the bad merge, we've got the right dad, notice HCB, HCB, but we've got the wrong mom. We've got YSK, we've got this other Elizabeth Hoyles who really married this guy and did not marry this guy. So we've got to clean this all up. So we're to the next step in our fixing process, which is to fix those incorrect relationships. So how do you do that? Well, this is a little counterintuitive, at least it seems so to me. So that's why we're going to walk through it. What you want to do, oh, I forgot. Um, Sometimes people will come to a page and they won't see any children. Well, okay, I just got a weird thing. I hope you can still hear me. Can you still hear me? Raise your hand if you can. Okay, thank you. Because I just got a little spinner on my computer, and a lot of times when that happens, it means something's bogging down. So I'm glad you can still hear me. Okay, so if you go to a page and you expect to see children, but you don't, it probably means the children are collapsed. So if this number is greater than zero, if the number of children is greater than zero, but you don't see children, just click the word children and it will open up the list of children. So click that if you need to, and then for William, we want to click the pencil next to his name. Again, this pencil looks slightly different since they've redesigned the interface, but it's still a pencil. And you click that, and this is what you get. You get a screen that looks like this. You'll see the dad at the top with remove or replace. You'll see the mom next with remove or replace. Then you'll see the kid with remove or replace. You might be tempted to do the dad first and then do the mom. But here's the thing I think is not really obvious. If you click remove or replace next to the kid, it removes both parents at once. So it just saves you a little bit of extra time. I think I'm hearing a voice. Are there questions that we need to address?
I'm sure it'll come up. I'm sure you'll clear it up in just a minute.
Okay, and if I don't, please ask because questions are the best. I love questions. So I hope you'll always feel free to ask them. I should have said that earlier. So we're going to click remove or replace next to William's name. And this is the screen. Again, interface is a little bit different. Now the look is a little bit different, but all the same stuff is there. So it's showing me that if I continue, I'm going to remove these parents, which is exactly what I want to do because they're the wrong parents. So I click the box down here saying, yes, I have carefully reviewed all the information and I do want to remove these parents. And then I get a box that is asking me for a reason statement. Well, to summarize all the research about Bolton and Wiley and da da da, I feel like that's too long for this. And so I believe in good reason statements, but I don't believe in going overboard and like writing a 5-page essay because it's just not going to be helpful to people and it's going to take a long time. So in this case, I just put William was connected to the wrong parents through incorrect merges on the parents. What that does is it tells people if you want more information, go to the parents, look in their change log at the wrong merge, and you'll be able to get the additional information that you need. But for here, I think this is clear enough and it's sufficient for just about any user that would come along. So after you've done that, you click remove and look, the wrong parents are gone. And then we would want to do the same thing for this couple, except we would just remove Elizabeth. Actually, I take that back. We would remove both parents. So I don't think I didn't do screenshots on this one just because I didn't want to be too redundant. But let me go back here to this screen. If I were to just remove the wrong mom, and you guys might have seen this before, then William would be left with no mother, but connected twice to his real father. Have you guys, anybody ever seen that? Raise your hand if you've seen that happen. Yeah. So to avoid that, even though we're only trying to disconnect the wrong mom, we want to choose the option to disconnect both parents. So when we do that, this is what we're left with. Now William only has one set of parents and they're the right ones. Sister, did that answer your question, or would you like to ask a question?
So my question was that William still had 6 other siblings under the wrong parents. So do you have,
Yep.
yeah, so that's why I was wondering, so you just have to go in with each one of them individually and do the same thing.
That is a really good question. I'm trying to think on this one. I believe that once I disconnected him from the parents, he no longer appeared with that family, so he wasn't connected to those children anymore. Does that make sense?
The other children that should have been the other Thomas and Elizabeth's children. So because you're separating the two families, because there were children
Right.
mixed in. So you've moved so William now has the right parents.
Yes.
6 siblings don't, because that Thomas and that Elizabeth were not married.
Yep, you're exactly right that any other siblings of Williams would have to be removed separately and joined into the right family. As it happened, it looked like there were actually 3 different families combined. So we'd have to go back and we'd have to make sure that all the children that didn't belong with that Bolton couple got moved out to the right couple. So to your point, you're absolutely right. You'd have to make sure that each child got put with the right couple.
So
Thank
would you ever go in and change the relationship between that Thomas and Elizabeth, who are not married to each other because they got 2 different places?
Oh, so let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you talking about this one right here where this Elizabeth, the Bolton Elizabeth, is connected to the Wally Thomas?
It's that.
Yeah, absolutely. You would disconnect that couple. And in fact, we are going to get to that. Thank you. I don't think I fully understood your question before, but yeah, definitely this has to be repaired. So yeah, we're going to get to that in just a second. And I'm so glad you asked about that. Okay, let's look now. We've got William with just the right set of parents, which is awesome. But as sister, you just pointed out, when we go to Thomas's page, we see that he's connected to the right wife, but connected to the wrong one as well. And so in that one, I don't think I walk through this either the whole way. Basically, you just would click the pencil and you'd get into a very similar screen that would to the one we looked at before that would allow you to disconnect this Elizabeth from this guy that she did not marry. Okay, so once we've done that, then we have to check Betty because she could be joined to wrong people, but fortunately she wasn't. So now things are looking a lot better. And we're to the last step of the untangling, which is fixing the incorrect information and sources. So when we go up to William's vital information section, we've got a wrong birth date. Remember, he's the Whalley guy. He's not the Bolton guy. And oh shoot, I don't remember. Sorry, you guys. I was trying to remember. I'm getting confused between like what I showed in the first class and what I showed in this condensed version of the 2 classes. So it looks like I don't show the change log here. So let me just comment that this Bolton birthplace was not part of his original identity, and it actually didn't even get added in those merges because they were merges on the parents. Somebody came through, I saw in the change log, and added Bolton as a birthplace because they jumped to the conclusion that since the other kids were born in Bolton, most of the other kids, except the ones that didn't really belong, but most of the kids were Bolton and the parents were married in Bolton. So they just stuck Bolton in as a birthplace with no evidence whatsoever. So, and notice that the birthplace is not standardized. It's the old style of entry. If any of you ever did extraction, just out of curiosity, raise your hands if you ever participated in the old extraction program. Okay, a few people did. So you probably recognize this old standard, but Family Search has changed their standard for dates since then. And so we're going to go in and correct that. So we go in and notice here that, and this is not required. I'm just sharing this because I think it's helpful and interesting. But what I'm sharing right here, you actually don't have to do if you don't want to. Because notice, Family Search looked at this date and they recognize it. So they added the standard. But what kind of bugs me a little bit is now the birth's in two places. We've got a non-standard version and we've got a standard version. And then for Bolton, we've got a non-standard version and a standard version. Well, and this is totally wrong. So what we want to do is standardize this completely and get rid of this. So here's a trick that I learned from a Family Search employee. If you ever see this duplicate and you don't want it, click in the non-standard one and click at the end and hit your space bar. And other people have told me you can hit any key, but then I'm afraid of messing up the date. So I think and that's the Family Search guy said, just click at the end and hit the space bar. When you do that, the list of standards drops down. And when you click the correct standard, it gets rid of the double entry. And then you just have the standard. And then for the birthplace, you just erase it. So this is, oh, and I forgot, we actually know the correct birthplace from, no, I take that back. For William, I never found him in the census in with a parish for the birthplace. I'm sorry, was that a question? I'm hearing the audio is a little bit like I could hear something in the background, but I'm not sure if it was a question.
I think it was the hallway.
Okay, good. Then I won't worry about it. So, just to explain on this birthplace, what I did is he was christened in Whalley, which is within Haslingden. So, Haslingden is also where his siblings were all recorded as being born. So the birth date appeared on his christening record, and the birthplace I inferred from the christening location and the birthplace of the other children. So I just noted that in the reason statement and set the birthplace as Haslingden. And then when we click save, his record is totally cleaned up. His vitals are totally cleaned up. So he's looking better. Now that his facts are straight, it's time to go into the sources. So we look at the first one, 1836, and as we review the information, it's got the exact same birth date, the exact same dad, even to the abbreviation of Thomas, the exact same mom with no maiden surname, the exact same christening date and place. So this source is a total match. So it's a good source. But then we go down to 1841 and look at what this source is for. It's for Bolton, so we know right away it's the wrong family. And it's got the wrong kids. It's got all the Bolton kids. So we want to detach this source. And just the other day, I had someone ask me or ask a question, and maybe it was on a forum or something, but they said, is it appropriate to detach a source that somebody else has added? Well, in a shared tree, because we're all collaborating to make this tree the best we can be, if you find a wrong source, absolutely, it's appropriate to detach it. And it's remarkably easy. So this is how we would detach this source. We would click on it, and when we click on it, it opens up, it expands, and one of the options right underneath is detach. So you click detach, and you get a little screen that is saying, why are you detaching this? So you just write a reasonable, clear explanation of why you know this source does not pertain to this guy. See, I've already found this William with his family in Whalley. This census is for a different guy, even though he's got the same name, but he lived with his family in Bolton. And it's as simple as that. And then we click detach, and the census is detached. It turns out the other one was wrong too. So you just go through the exact same procedure. Now But we know our guy is in the 1841 census because in our research, we found him there. So we want to attach the correct one. The easiest way I know of to do that is to click the Family Search logo here, because many of you may already be familiar with this, but for those of you who may not be, these icons over here, these links, actually are search functions. And if you click them, whatever one you click, it grabs the information off the page and runs the search using that information on whatever site. So I click Family Search, it grabs this information, searches Family Search historical records. I click Ancestry, grabs the information, searches ancestry.com, etc. So we're going to click Family Search. And we go in here and we look down, and the third one is a great match. So we look at it, it's in the right location, it's got the right family members, but look what's going on. We've got a little icon here that says that it's already attached to somebody. And at first, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, wait, is it attached to my guy? Nope. Remember, our guy did not start with a G. The G PIDs are relatively new. If you see a G, it's been added since fall of 2018. So this source is connected to a different William Parkinson. Right or wrong? I don't know at this point. All I know is it's connected to a different guy. Now, how many of you have ever gone down a rabbit hole? I hear the laughter and I see the hands. I think we all have. And this is a time where it could be tempting to go down a rabbit hole, but we're already in the process of cleaning up a mess, right? We're cleaning up the sources, and to deal with this potential duplicate, because we may need to do another merge here, or we may not. Maybe the source is wrongly attached to this guy. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. So I am just going to make a note to myself that I'm going to deal with this later. So I write down the name, I write down the PID, and I make a note that the 1841 census that I want to attach to my William is attached to this guy. And then I just keep going with my cleanup. So now I've cleaned up William, but because the bad merges were on the parents, and this ties in with what the sister said earlier, that I also want to clean up the parents because I know they were damaged in the merge. And so I go back here to Thomas. This wasn't a merge problem. This is just in the old extraction program. They told people to write down the name exactly as it was, and that prevented a lot of problems. That was good counsel. But if you've done much research in England, you know that THOS is a standard abbreviation for Thomas, and on other records, they used his full name. So I just clicked edit and I put his full name in. And because I'd found him in the census, then I was also able to add birth information, which was not there before. Why do I bother to do this? Because it helps prevent future bad merges. Now it's very obvious this guy is not the Bolton Thomas. Whereas before, he had no birth information, and that's part of the reason it was easy to make a bad merge. We go to Betty and we add her birth information from the census, but no maiden surname. So when women don't have any surname, that's a great visual cue that the maiden surname is not known. But what I found is it also tends to lead novices to bad merges because they don't stop to find the surname and they just assume, oh, Betty, that's a nickname for Elizabeth. Let's merge them. They're both from England, and then the merge gets done and if I left it this way, there's a chance that the bad merge could be repeated. So this is one where I felt that it was worth it to walk through how we could find her maiden surname, because this one was a little tricky, but it also illustrates some good principles. Let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, we've got about 20 minutes. We're doing well, or actually about 10 minutes. We're doing well on time because we're supposed to stop at 10 to the hour. So to find her maiden surname, I want to use a principle that I have found incredibly helpful in family history, and that is using the truth or the facts that we know to discover what we don't know. When we start from truth we know, it's easier to build a solid bridge to additional information. So for Betty, this is a comparison. No, it's not. I apologize. Okay, this is Betty's family in both the 1841 census and the 1851 census. So what we see, actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So let me back up there. I'm going to get that call out off the screen. One thing I did want to point out here is that Betty and Thomas are together in the 1841 census, but by the 1851, Betty has remarried. And I actually didn't have room to put her husband on here. Thomas is deceased, but Betty has a new husband called Henry Barlow. So let's look at how we can find a marriage record. I started by wanting the marriage record of Thomas and Betty, and I didn't just want to search for Thomas Parkinson and any Betty being married anytime in Lancashire, because that would be crazy. I'd get too many results. So I want to narrow it down. I look at the birth years, and people usually didn't get married before age 18. There were exceptions, but usually not. So I want to start searching in about 1814, when these kids would have turned about 18. And then the first kid was born about 22. So most likely here we've got a frame, right? A time frame that probably their marriage took place between 1814 and 1822. So, and they were probably, this is just the custom in England at this time. Women were usually married in their home parish. So probably we're looking for a marriage in Haslingden. So click I go to historical records and I bring up the search form and I put in that I'm looking for a Thomas Mark Parkinson who marries in Haslington in this time frame, and he marries somebody named Betty. And Family Search is really good about searching derivative names. So they would also probably bring up an Elizabeth. If they didn't, I would rerun the search just to be sure. But when I did the search, look what I found. Two plausible marriages, and I have no clue which one is right. And did he marry her and she died, and by coincidence he married another Betty? Well, at least he'd never worry about calling his second wife the wrong name, right? Could be an advantage. Or this could be just a totally different couple. At this point, I don't know. And I looked at the records. There were no other clues, such as an occupation or parents or any other family members or anything. Right now, I have no clue whether my Betty is Betty Ashworth or whether she's Betty Barnes. So that actually turned out not to be so helpful, but we're not giving up because we have another great clue. Betty remarried. So there's going to be another marriage record. And the later records in England, as in most countries, tend to be more complete than the earlier ones. So there's a good chance. So they must have gotten married between 41, when Thomas was still alive, and 51, when we know he was deceased and she was remarried. So here we're going to do another one of those throw the cupcakes in the oven and fast forward, we're done. Here is the marriage record I found for Henry Barlow and Betty Parkinson. Everything lines up. She's a widow. She's of full age, which meant that she was not a minor, not under the legal age of marriage, which is what we would expect for her situation. She was living in Haslingden at the time of the marriage, and look at her dad. Her dad is Henry Barnes. So now we're confident that our Betty is Betty Barnes, not Betty Ashworth.
Uh.
So we come back here and we correct her maiden surname to be Barnes, and this is how the corrected record looks. Oh, and we add the marriage information because now I could go back to that first marriage and enter the date of the Thomas Parkinson who married Betty Barnes. Okay, now then I look at Betty's page and I see that when I added the surname, I got more duplicate hints. We're not going to, and look, one of them's for the wrong Betty. Or possibly, maybe it really is a first wife. I think it's unlikely that he married, like statistically, it's not very probable that he married a Betty who died and a year later married a different Betty, but it could happen. So I would need to do some research. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there's going to be additional research to do. And sister, this goes back to your observation earlier about siblings being connected in the wrong place. This is yet another set of siblings. And as I recall, I think some of them were the same, but not all of them. So some of them were connected to the wrong parents here, because notice somebody created a new Thomas Parkinson. It's not even the same guy. And then they were also connected to the other parents. So the reason I'm pointing this out is that we can start to feel like we're fighting Hydra. Do you remember the monster in the myth that every time the warrior would chop off a head, two more would grow in its place? This can be what it feels like when you're trying to untangle messes in family tree, and the solution is to write things down. So I want to just very, very quickly say some options because sometimes people go, oh, write things down. I don't have time for that. And it's confusing and it's tedious, and I'll never remember why I wrote it down or whatever. Well, the solution to the latter part is to provide sufficient detail. Do take a few minutes to write down enough detail. You'll be glad you did. But as far as options, you can use paper. You can use an electronic document like Google. You can use a traditional research log. Just Google that. You can get it both paper and online. I know people that like to put their stuff in a spreadsheet like Excel. I have a friend who swears by Evernote. Other people use OneNote. Those are kind of electronic notebooks. Trello, you can Google this if you haven't used it. It's basically electronic cards that you can sort into columns and assign them to tasks and so forth. It's really a fun little program. So or you could look at it as electronic post-it notes. So Trello is a fun program. The timeline grid, you can Google that. That's kind of a structured research log that is used for families that you find in the census. My last one I wanted to mention is Goldie May. Richard Miller, the developer of Goldie May, is at this conference and he's amazing. Also, one of the nicest people I've ever met. So I want to give a little plug to Goldie May, and I'm not being compensated for this in any way. So this is just done because I really like this app. So there are both free and paid versions. The URL is goldiemay.com. One thing is people sometimes will try to spell this M-A-E, and just be aware that it's M-A-Y. So don't search for M-A-E. So it's designed especially to be used with family history, unlike a spreadsheet, for example. It integrates with Family Search. There are features where you can stick in a PID and it will actually link to the person's record in Family Search. There's also a cool feature called a subway map that is a graphic way of illustrating anomalies on the person. For instance, if all their dates and places were in one parish in England, and then suddenly I've had this happen actually. Went on a record where the guy was born and died in England, and yet somebody had attached a census source that was before he was born that had him immigrating to New York. So the subway map would show that. It would show that there was a New York blip on the little subway graphic that was before the guy was born, and everything else was in England. So Goldie May, fantastic tool. I would recommend trying out the free version. The paid version, of course, has more features, and you may or may not decide to go with the paid version. So let's see, we've got 1 minute to go through our success tips. The first one is prioritize. You can't do or fix everything, and that's okay. Pray about it if you're wondering where to focus. The next tip is be methodical, follow a process, and write things down. This is an example of a template, and I can give this slide deck to Cameron to give to anybody. Actually, and I'll show my email at the end. You can email me if you'd like a copy. This slide deck, these links are live. So you can actually, if you want a template that you can use for sorting out bad merges. Sorry, I kind of didn't explain that very well. This is a template for sorting out bad merges. If you'd like a copy, email me and I can give you a link to the template. The next tip is be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Don't make assumptions. Use what you know to discover what you don't know. Don't merge unless you're really sure they're the same people, and do your best to add accurate information. And the bonus tip is if you're feeling overwhelmed or going, oh my gosh, this is just intimidating me, please know that it gets easier as you build your skills. So I won't bother with the summary because you guys probably all know that. And there is my email address and also a link to my website where I've got links to this slide deck and also recordings, because this class is taught at BYU and it's recorded every time that it's taught. So you guys, thank you so much for coming today. So they told me to stop at 10 till, but if you have questions, I would be very happy to entertain any. And thanks you guys for coming. I really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.